Hi, everybody, and welcome to Lovefraud Live. Senior sociopaths are everywhere, including in the workplace. They kiss up to the bosses and manipulate their coworkers, leaving plenty of turmoil in their wake. If you work with or do business with someone who is always causing problems, this episode of Lovefraud Live is for you. I'm Donna Andersen, author of Lovefraud.com, and tonight I'll talk about senior sociopaths in the workplace. At the end of this presentation, I'll answer your questions. To join the chat or ask a question, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Okay, some senior sociopaths are in jail. Many are parasites living off of a partner or a family member. But millions of senior sociopaths are in the workplace, causing havoc with coworkers, customers, and sometimes bringing down the entire company. Think Bernie Madoff. If you're working with senior sociopaths in any context, here's what you need to do. Watch your back. My new book, which is called Senior Sociopaths, How to Recognize and Escape Lifelong Abusers, is now available on Lovefraud and on Amazon. My book is based on surveys that I conducted with Lovefraud readers. Most survey respondents described romantic partners or family members, but 62 people described a work colleague or a business associate. These were not pleasant experiences. I asked survey respondents to describe the senior sociopath's behavior at work. So, what did they say? Here are the top descriptions. 81% said the senior sociopath manipulates others in the organization. 76% said that if anything goes wrong, they blame someone else. 74% said that the individual can't be trusted. 69% said that the senior sociopaths have the people above them in the organization fooled. 60% said the individual promises but does not deliver. 55% said the senior sociopath is a bully. And finally, 55% also said that he or she violated policy or the law, but got away with it. So, those are some statistics, but what does this look like in real life? Several survey respondents described their experiences in detail. One wrote that the senior sociopath interfered with her promotion by lying to superiors. When the survey respondent transferred to get away from him, the sociopath asked the CEO to make her return. Another survey respondent said a female coworker love-bombed anyone who could potentially be useful to her in the future. Yes, love-bombing isn't just for romances. This woman also suckered coworkers into doing things for her that she could have done for herself. Why? For entertainment. Finally, another survey respondent said a senior sociopath refused to do the work as they discussed. He hid information so people could not make informed decisions. As you can see, a work relationship with a senior sociopath is miserable. But 283 respondents had both business and personal relationships with the senior sociopaths. Some were romantic partners as well as business partners. Some worked with them in the family business. Purely business involvements with sociopaths are damaging enough, but the two combined are downright destructive. For example, here's some of the harm that survey respondents said they endured. 59% of those in strictly business relationships said they lost money, but this happened to 71% of respondents in business plus personal relationships. 69% in business relationships also endured emotional abuse, compared with 95% who had business and personal relationships. 47% in the business scenario suffered PTSD because of the experience. This happened to 72% of respondents who also had personal relationships. And finally, 12% in business relationships had their lives threatened, and this happened to 29% of those in business plus personal relationships. While working on my book, I made another interesting discovery that I'd like to tell you about. All survey respondents were asked to rate the index individual's traits of antisocial personality disorder or psychopathy according to the scale published in the first draft of the DSM-5. Approximately half of respondents in all relationship categories completed this trait rating question, and usually it broke down like this. The most widespread traits of the sociopaths were manipulativeness and deceitfulness. Traits such as callousness, aggression, hostility, and narcissism were rated as extremely like that or moderately like that 80 to 95% of the time. Traits like irresponsibility, recklessness, and impulsivity were not as common. Then I noticed an anomaly. Only 53% of respondents who worked with the senior sociopaths said they exhibited extreme or moderate hostility. Now remember, the figure is usually 80 to 95%. So why was this rating so much lower than normal? To explore this question further, I analyzed the trait data according to the type of relationship. And I found that the romantic partners and family members of sociopaths reported the highest scores for antisocial personality disorder or psychopathy. Manipulativeness was consistently high across all relationship groups, but there was less consistency in the other traits. So, what does this mean? I don't know for sure, but one possibility may be that sociopaths are quite capable of moderating their behavior when necessary, such as in a work environment. They can behave civilly enough or keep their manipulation subtle enough to hold on to their jobs. Romantic partners, spouses, and family members, on the other hand, saw more of the sociopathic traits. Either those respondents were around the sociopaths more, or the sociopaths simply did not bother to camouflage their behavior at home. Or perhaps the sociopaths simply treat the people closest to them the worst. So if you're living with or working with a senior sociopath, please educate yourself. My book, as I said, it's called Senior Sociopaths: How to Recognize and Escape Lifelong Abusers. It's now available in the Lovefraud store and on Amazon. There are links in the description below the video window. I hope you'll get it, and if you do, please post a review. It will really help me. Okay, so, well, no questions yet, but I'm sure they will come. So, interestingly enough, my marriage to the sociopath was also a situation where the business and the personal relationships were intertwined. In fact, gosh, where do we start? That was the essential purpose of why my ex-husband, James Montgomery, targeted me. He essentially was looking for someone to fund his dreams of grandeur. He had all these great ideas about the businesses that he would start and the success that he would be. He actually said to me that he was going to be the next Walt Disney. I mean, that's how confident he was, I guess you could say. But the thing is, with sociopaths, They talk a really good game. He did exhibit confidence. I mean, there was never any doubt in his mind that he would succeed, or at least he certainly didn't present it to me. And unfortunately, not knowing that sociopaths existed, I bought it. I fell for it. And in fact, that was one of the things that one of the strategies that he used in order to seduce me was to talk about what great business partners we would be and what a great team we would be and how successful we would be. Because I had a business. I had my writing business, a boutique advertising agency, and he just thought that this would, dovetail right into all his plans and we would work really well together. He talked a good game. It sounded good. But he couldn't pull it off. Essentially, he did talk a lot. He went to a lot of meetings, or at least he claimed he was going to meetings. Where he was really going, I don't know. But that's what he did. And I was in one of those categories of people who had a business and personal relationship and was devastated by it. He took $250,000 from me. And actually, it was more than that because I paid all our living expenses as well as all these business expenses trying to help him achieve his dreams, which he said would be my dreams as well. So the $227,000 that I claimed in my divorce was just the business expenses, let alone another $100,000 or whatever it was of living expenses that I also paid. So, and then the other thing, of course, that happened was that because I was putting so much of my energy into trying to help him achieve his dreams, my business went down the drain. I ended up in debt. So he all the money I was making was going to funding him. He took up all my time. And the other thing that happened was that I was appalled at the way he did business, because he was schlocky and he would lie and, he wouldn't honor his obligations. And I remember one of the big thing that we were trying to do. I mean, he had all these little business plans that he wanted. But then back when the Titanic movie came out in late 1997, early 1998, which was a huge phenomenon, if you remember, he came up with the idea of opening a Titanic exhibit in Atlantic City, New Jersey, where we live. And he actually got investors and got partners, and the show was headed toward launch. And then it sank again. The Titanic was not meant to be. But what was interesting to me as we were going through that experience, not interesting, it was more like shocking, was how willing he was to just do a schlock job and to lie to investors and lie to the venues and everything like that. And quite frankly, I was embarrassed. There were multiple times when we were working together that I was embarrassed by his total lack of ethics and his total manipulation. And even as I was going through this, I still didn't quite get what it was. And I didn't know at this point anything about sociopaths or what they looked like. I mean, I never thought a sociopath would be wearing a suit jacket with a handkerchief in the pocket, but that's what he did. So I was blindsided by the whole thing. So, we have some comments here. All right, so Stephanie says her situation was the same. And so Sand Rescue asks, how long afterwards did you realize that something was off? Well, it's quite the story. In fact, if you want to know the whole story, you should get my first book called Lovefraud, where I tell the whole thing. But I was confused. I mean, just like when you're confused in a romantic relationship, you're confused in a business relationship, and I couldn't figure it out, and I couldn't figure out how he was doing all this stuff, and nothing was working, and I was running out of money, and everything like that. And I knew fairly early on that I was, he was taking a lot of money, but he never took it from me. It was always an investment in our future. I was paying our expenses. I was paying his expenses as he went out to pitch these ideas and everything. So, I mean, he never stole money out of my wallet or something like that, but he just presented it that, I was keeping us afloat while he went out for the big score. And it wasn't until later, because I kept going along with this thinking, I mean, I wasn't happy and I was afraid of going broke, but I would ask myself, what wife leaves her husband because the business plans aren't working out? At the time, I didn't know he was cheating on me. I didn't know he was having a child with another woman, but I mean, this is what I saw. So when I finally discovered that he was cheating on me and had a child with another woman, that's when I left him. And that's also when I started going through his mountain of paperwork, because it was like he was a pack rat. He had papers all over the place. And in going through them, I find all these other women that he's in contact with. And so after I left him, a couple months later, I'm going through this paper, I'm finding these names, I'm finding phone numbers. So I called one of them. And I called her up, and she answered the phone, and I said, I'm Donna Andersen. I'm James Montgomery's wife, and I'd like to suggest that you don't give him any more money. She said, it's too late. I already gave him $92,000. That is when I realized the entire thing was a financial scam. So it actually wasn't until I discovered that he was cheating on me. I discovered that he had a child with another woman. That's why I left him. But it was after that, when I talked to a different woman who also lost money, that's when I realized that the whole thing was a scam. Okay, Stephanie, glad to hear from you. We haven't seen you in a while. So glad. Okay. Right. So that's what Stephanie says. You go through money quickly when you're not only supporting him, but also funding the business. Absolutely. That's what happened. So Stephanie had a similar experience. Mine would get far along in putting something together, a business deal, but then he'd try to take over the majority of the leadership role and the money to be made. Yes, I've definitely heard plenty of stories like that, where, something is, oh gosh, I've heard plenty of people tell me about how they've built up the business and then they get involved romantically, often, with a sociopath, and suddenly the sociopath wants to horn in on the business and take it over, and there have been quite a few cases where the sociopath has actually managed to get the business away from the person who originally founded that. So yeah, that's another thing that happens. Okay, so Stephanie asks, how many sociopaths are entrepreneurs versus working for others, and how many are genuinely successful? Well, it's quite possible that there are many successful sociopaths in business, and I'll tell you why I say that. I've spoken before about Dr. Robert Hare, who is the author of Without Conscience, which is a very good, easy to read book that explains psychopathic behavior. Dr. Hare is the person who actually developed what's called the Psychopathy Checklist Revised, which is the rating form that is most commonly used to measure someone's level of psychopathy. Now, it was originally developed to try and predict which people who were in prison would recidivate, which means to reoffend once they were released. I mean, that was the original objective of developing the test. But it has proven to be very accurate in measuring how disordered people are. So Dr. Hare also uses the term psychopathy, and the definition of psychopathy is a little bit more narrow than the definition of antisocial personality disorder. The two disorders are very similar, but not precisely the same. Most people say that about 4% of the population have antisocial personality disorder, but Dr. Hare says about 1% of the population have psychopathy. So that's what he says. 1% of the general population have psychopathy. But he also measured corporate executives. They did some research giving this test to people who were in the corner offices in companies. And he found that 3.5% of the corporate executives met the criteria for psychopathy compared to 1% of the general population. So what that means is that there are 3.5 times as many psychopaths in corporate offices than there are on the street. So it's very possible for them to be successful. I've heard of quite a few very famous people who have been described as being psychopathic. So yeah, they can certainly be successful. I mean, they're cutthroat and maybe breaking the law. In fact, there was some other research that came out back, maybe 2010, 2012 or something like that, looking at the 2008 recession. And one researcher based in the UK theorized that the whole 2008 recession was caused by psychopaths playing with other people's money. Psychopaths in the financial services business playing with other people's money. And so he attributed the entire 2008 collapse to those individuals. So, yeah, I mean, they can sometimes be very successful. Okay. So, Gerald asks, are there noticeable differences between male and female senior sociopaths? I actually talked about this, was it 2 weeks ago? So if you want to take a look at that video, there are first of all, both male and female senior sociopaths are really bad news. But we did find in other research that the male sociopaths did tend to inflict more damage than the females did. More relationship harm, more abuse, more emotional abuse, more psychological abuse. So the men typically are worse, at least in quantitative terms, although plenty of people have been involved with female senior sociopaths, and it's pretty bad. So, I mean, they're both bad, but yes, we did have research that indicates that the men are worse. Okay. So Celeste says, the sociopath doesn't let you breathe or let up enough to allow time to process what's going on, and I had to get away to think. And that's absolutely the case. In fact, that's a standard sociopathic con artist strategy, is they need a decision right away. And my ex-husband did that to me all the time, Oh, I got a lead and we have to act on it right now. So, do you have $20,000? I'm like, no, I don't have $20,000. Well, what do you got? And I said, well, maybe 10. Okay, I can get the rest somewhere else. Give me the $10,000 because I got this deal and we have to do it right away, which I actually heard. And, unfortunately, yeah, with that particular deal, which is in the book, if you want to get it, you could read the whole thing. In that time, I agreed to it, but I felt really bad about it. And then I went back to him a little bit later. I mean, within an hour, maybe even less than an hour, and said, I don't think this is such a good idea. So he said to me, well, I already told him we were doing it. And I'm like, well, I mean, I'm trying to help my husband get established. So, I wanted to make sure that he could keep his obligations. So I went ahead and gave him the money. And then a year later, something like that, I found out that the deal never existed at all. All it was a ploy from him to get me to give him money. There was no deal. So, okay. Well, did I miss anything? All right. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for joining me tonight. We will have another episode of Lovefraud Live next week, next Tuesday. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.